You know that feeling when you look up at a city skyline? You just see these incredible towers of glass and steel, right? They're just stretching up into the clouds, almost impossibly high. I mean, they are absolutely breathtaking. We see them as these huge monuments to what we can achieve, right? They promise this lifestyle that's just beyond compare. They're basically icons of wealth, of progress, and yeah, prestige. But what if I told you that beneath that glittering facade, there are some pretty dark secrets? We're talking about stories of really costly mistakes, actual structural nightmares, and a deep human cost that kind of tarnishes that glamorous image. So, what is really going on inside these vertical palaces? Okay, so let's start with the stuff you can literally see and touch, the physical failures. And this is going to sound crazy, but some of the world's most exclusive, most expensive addresses are, well, they're literally falling apart. Let's take the Millennium Tower in San Francisco, for example. It was sold as this incredible masterpiece, right? But it had one very fundamental problem. It was sinking. And I don't mean just a little bit. Get this, the tower sank almost 18 inches, and it started to lean. Now, to put that in perspective, the engineers had predicted it would sink maybe 4 to 6 inches over its entire lifetime. So this is a huge deal. Residents started reporting cracks, windows that wouldn't close right, creepy creaking floors. The whole dream of luxury living just turned into a nightmare of uncertainty. And you might think, okay, that's just one building, a fluke. But no, this isn't a one-off. If we head across the country to New York City, 432 Park Avenue. I mean, this thing is one of the tallest residential towers in the entire Western Hemisphere. It has its own list of shocking problems. The residents there, who by the way paid tens of millions for their apartments, have listed over 1,500 defects. Just try to imagine that. We're talking about major leaks and flooding, elevators that just shut down for weeks at a time, and even accusations that the builders used cheap, substandard concrete just to avoid project delays. It's wild. So you gotta ask, what's causing all these failures? Well, in a nutshell, it's because engineers are pushing these building materials to their absolute breaking point limits. As this one user on a structural engineering forum pointed out, when you're designing with these super new, high-strength materials, every single property has to be tested perfectly. A tiny, tiny miscalculation in something like, say, the concrete's elasticity, well, that can cascade into the massive, expensive consequences we've just been talking about. But, you know, the foundations of these buildings, they aren't just made of concrete and steel. They're built by people. And when we look at that human foundation, that's where we find an even deeper and, frankly, a moral problem. Think about those incredible, futuristic skylines in places like Dubai or Doha. Well, they were built almost entirely on the backs of millions of migrant workers. We're talking an estimated 10 million people, mostly from South Asia and Africa. But the system that actually governs their employment, well, it's deeply, deeply exploitative. It's a system called kafala, and what it does essentially is it links a worker's immigration status directly to their employer, their sponsor. This gives the sponsor almost total control. They can decide if a worker can change jobs, if they can leave the country, or even if they can keep their legal status. You can see how this creates a massive and really dangerous power imbalance. And the results of this system, they're pretty grim. A report looked at allegations of abuse over just a 2-year period, and listen to these numbers. 76% of the claims involved employers illegally holding onto workers' passports, which basically traps them. 71% involved workers not getting paid on time, or sometimes not at all. So this isn't about a few bad apples, right? This is a systemic problem that's built right into the very foundation of these mega projects. Okay, so beyond the physical and the moral costs, there's an even bigger picture to look at here. It turns out the construction of these record-breaking towers doesn't just impact the people building them. It might actually be a huge warning sign for the entire global economy. There's this fascinating theory from an economist named Andrew Lawrence, and it's called the Skyscraper Effect. The basic idea is that the very things that lead to these record-breaking towers being built, tons of easy credit, massive overinvestment, and just this dizzying sky-high market confidence, those are also the classic warning signs of a huge economic bubble that's about to burst. And when you look back through history, the correlation is, well, it's kind of spooky. The Empire State Building was finished just as the Great Depression really took hold. Then you have the Sears Tower in Chicago, completed right before the 1973 oil crisis and a massive market crash. And the Petronas Towers in Malaysia, they opened their doors right as the Asian financial crisis was sweeping through the region. Is it just a coincidence? Or is it something more, like a curse? So that brings up a pretty big question, right? If these buildings are physically flawed, and they might be signaling an economic disaster, who on earth is buying these multi-million-dollar apartments? Well, here's the twist. A lot of them aren't buying a home at all. This is where the whole idea of what a home is for gets completely flipped on its head. For the super, super rich, these luxury units aren't really for living in. They're something else entirely. People have called them safe deposit boxes in the sky. They're basically financial tools designed not to house people, but to house money. I mean, why would you leave a $10 million penthouse totally empty? It sounds crazy, but the real value isn't actually in living there. It's a way to park huge sums of money somewhere safe, away from unpredictable stock markets or political instability back home. And by using layers and layers of anonymous shell companies, the owners can stay virtually untraceable, which helps them avoid taxes and any kind of regulatory checkup. Plus, in some countries, buying a fancy property like this can even fast-track you to getting a new passport. All right, there's one final cost we have to talk about, and this one affects all of us, the entire planet. What is the real environmental price we're paying for our obsession with these giant glass towers? Believe it or not, this is a really serious debate that's happening right now among architects and city planners. As climate change gets worse and worse, some very prominent experts, including the mayor of New York City, have pointed the finger at all glass buildings as a major, major problem. So the argument to ban them is actually pretty simple. Glass is a terrible insulator, right? It's like living in a greenhouse. That means these buildings need enormous amounts of energy just for heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. Plus, and this is a big one, the facade, the glass skin of the building, only lasts about 25 to 40 years. That means it's got to be totally replaced 3 or 4 times over the tower's life. That is a massive carbon cost. Now, on the other side, defenders will say, hey, all that natural light is great for workers, it improves well-being and productivity, and they argue that we should focus on innovating better materials instead of just an outright ban. So it all comes back to this. When we look up at these incredible structures, yeah, we see symbols of wealth and ambition, but now we know there is so much more to the story, right? We've seen the cracking foundations, the exploited workers, the distorted economies, and this huge environmental toll. And all of that leaves us with one final, really important question to think about. As we keep racing to build higher and higher into the sky, what exactly are we sacrificing down here on the ground?